Frank Mir adjusted the strap of his M4 combat rifle as he stepped through the towering gates of the Celestial Palace, boots tapping against the polished, crystalline floor. The massive hall stretched out before him, alive with shimmering light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the stars above. He moved with the disciplined calm of a soldier who'd seen too much but trusted little. His eyes scanned every reflective surface, every corner shadow, while his expression remained stone. The Australian guards flanked the perimeter in ceremonial armor that looked more artistic than functional, with energy weapons that pulsed in subtle hues. They stood like statues, but Frank could feel their eyes on him, judging, measuring, uncertain whether to see a protector or a threat dot at his side. Ambassador Thurin, tall and slender with the glistening silvery skin of his kind, walked with regal ease. "You seem tense, human," Thurin remarked, his voice smooth as polished glass. "With all due respect, sir," Frank muttered, adjusting the weight of the tactical vest against his chest. "Peaceful species usually don't need armed escorts." Thurin chuckled softly. "Ah, but you forget. After the Battle of Proxima, humans are more than soldiers. You're legends, beings of defiance and impossible odds." Frank didn't smile. He remembered Proxima all too well. It wasn't legend. It was 3 days of fire and screams, of watching friends disintegrate under alien plasma. If that made him a legend, he'd take obscurity any day. They arrived at the throne room's grand double doors, adorned with ancient etchings that shimmered with life. A vibration thrummed through the floor as the doors opened, unveiling a chamber that made even a seasoned soldier pause. The ceiling was a dome of transparent crystal, capturing the starscape above with such clarity it felt like standing in the void of space. Pillars of refracting light lined the hall, and between them, a throne carved from living crystal pulsed with soft energy. On that throne sat Queen Theandra. Frank had seen hollows of her, everyone had. But nothing had prepared him for the real thing. Her light blue skin shimmered subtly like moonlight on the ocean, and her crimson hair spilled around her shoulders in molten waves. She was tall, regal, eyes silver like frozen lightning, and as those eyes settled on him, he felt them search deeper than any scanner ever could. "Welcome, Ambassador Thurin," she said, her voice ringing through the chamber, pure and commanding. Then her gaze lingered on Frank. "And to your human guardian." "Welcome." Frank gave a small nod, keeping his tone steady. "Ma'am." Formality unfolded around him, alien diplomacy, elaborate rituals of light and language, but Frank watched. The walls, not the words. Something in his gut twisted, a feeling he knew well. The calm before something broke. Then he saw it, a faint ripple in the air above like heat distortion. Training kicked in. "Down!" Frank roared, lunging forward. He slammed into the Queen, just as a searing plasma bolt scorched the space where she had been. The throne exploded into shards of white crystal. Chaos erupted. Guards yelled, weapons drawn. The shimmer moved again, an assassin with active camouflage. Frank rolled up from his dive, weapon drawn. 2 shots. The first shattered the cloaking field. The second struck true. The assassin dropped, black armor oozing purple blood. 100. Guards moved at once, but Frank didn't flinch. He stood between them and the Queen, weapon raised, eyes locked on the corners. "Stand down," Thindra's voice rang out. The room froze. She rose slowly, her hands trembling, though her expression remained composed. "It seems," she said, her voice steadier now, "I owe you my life, human." Frank lowered his rifle but didn't move away. "Just doing my job, Your Majesty." "No," she said firmly, something ancient and heavy creeping into her voice. "You misunderstand. According to our oldest law, one passed from the first monarch to now, any who saves the life of the Queen is granted one wish, anything within my power." and that do not break tradition. Gasps echoed through the hall. The guards straightened. The tension tightened. Frank looked at her, really looked, and saw more than a monarch. He saw a woman behind the crown, a soul who bore the weight of a civilization. Something flickered in her eyes when his didn't turn away. I know your customs, Frank said quietly. I respectfully decline. You cannot, she snapped, not in anger, but in desperation. It is binding. Refusal would bring dishonor to both of us. Frank hesitated. Then, with a voice steady and strong, he spoke so that the entire room heard. Then I make my wish. I wish to be with you. Silence. Not a breath. Not a whisper. The shock was universal. Finder's face shifted, outrage, disbelief, then something else entirely. Her blue skin darkened, not in fury, but in a flush. A reaction her people rarely showed in public. You dare? She whispered, silver eyes locked with his, but the words had been said. The wish was made. The law bound her. She turned to the guards, voice ironclad. Take him to my chambers, she said through clenched teeth. I will address this presumption privately. As he was led away, Frank caught Thyron's expression, half horror, half awe. Only a human would be insane enough to do what Frank just did, and that's exactly why he smiled. Frank Meir stood at the center of the Queen's private chambers, his boots planted firmly on floor panels that shimmered like ice under starlight. The air in the room carried a strange electric charge, as though the palace itself disapproved of his presence. He had expected anger, maybe even arrest. What he hadn't expected was the sound of soft footsteps approaching from behind, slow and deliberate, like a predator circling prey. You don't look sorry, Queen Thindra said, her voice low, controlled. Dangerous. Frank turned, keeping his posture neutral but unflinching. I'm not. The Queen didn't respond immediately. Her eyes, those piercing silver orbs, narrowed as she studied him. Every move she made was fluid and poised, but something behind the careful grace betrayed her tension. Not fear, not quite. Something more. Human. You made a mockery of one of our oldest, most sacred traditions, she said. You stood in front of my court and asked for me as if I were a prize to be claimed. I didn't ask to own you, Frank said, voice calm. I asked to be with you. There's a difference. Semantics, she snapped. You placed me in an impossible position. Refuse and I dishonor a tradition older than my reign. Accept and I, her voice trailed off. You what? He asked gently. Thindra turned away, the red silk of her gown swirling like fire. I lose control of the narrative. Frank's eyes narrowed. Then maybe it's time you write a new one, she spun on him. You don't understand. You're human. You come from a culture where emotion is currency. In my world, restraint is survival. I cannot be seen favoring you. Already the noble houses plot. The bloodline purists whisper. Then let them whisper, Frank said. You're the Queen. She approached, and when she was within a breath of him, her voice dropped to a razor-thin whisper. And if I make one wrong move, I won't be. Frank didn't flinch. And what's the right move? Deny what you feel to appease the same people who've let assassins into your palace? That stopped her cold. For a moment, there was only the low hum of the crystalline walls around them. What makes you so sure I feel anything at all? She asked, but there was no fire behind the question, only the edge of something breaking. Because you didn't have me executed, Frank replied. Because you brought me here where the walls aren't listening. Because you haven't looked away since you walked in. Thindra's expression flickered, shame, anger, longing, and then she exhaled. I don't know what you're doing. To me, she said. Frank stepped closer, not touching, but close enough that she could feel his warmth. Neither do I, but I know it's real. Her breath hitched slightly. You're reckless. I'm human, he said. It's practically in the job description." There was silence again, and then unbidden she reached up and touched his jaw, her cool fingers brushing his skin with the faintest tremble. "They'll say I've been compromised." "Let them," he whispered. "As long as you know you haven't." Before she could respond, a chime rang through the chamber, a low, urgent tone that carried weight. "What is it?" Frank asked, instantly scanning the walls for a comport. Thindra's hand flicked toward a nearby panel. A holographic window opened, revealing Ambassador Theron's face, pale and tense. "Your Majesty, we've just intercepted a data pulse from the outer defense grid. Someone's trying to access the throne's neural interface from outside." "The palace? Someone still inside the system?" Frank asked, already moving toward the weapons locker embedded in the wall. "No," Theron said grimly. "Someone is already part of the system." Thindra's expression froze. "Prel," she whispered, "the etiquette master." Frank remembered the sharp-eyed, humorless instructor who had been overseeing his cultural lessons. He'd seemed like just another bureaucrat, annoying but harmless. "I'll find him," Frank said. "You can't just storm the inner sanctum," Thindra said. "It's protected by ancient protocols. He won't be alone." "I don't need to storm anything," Frank replied. "I just need to get close enough to make him talk." She hesitated. "If you go and fail, the court will blame Earth. The alliance could shatter." "If I don't go," he countered, "we both die wondering what might have been." Their eyes locked again. No more masks, no more walls. Just the terrifying possibility of connection. "Go," she said at last, "but don't die." Frank gave her a half smile. "That's the plan." He stepped back, turned toward the exit, then paused at the threshold. "You asked what I wanted when I made my wish," he said. "It wasn't to trap you. It wasn't even really about you being queen. I just saw someone strong, someone real, and I thought, maybe she's just as alone as I am." Thindra didn't speak, but her silence said everything. Then Frank was gone, leaving behind a woman who had ruled empires, but was only now beginning to understand what it meant to be seen. The corridors of the celestial palace were less like hallways and more like arteries of light-pulsing crystalline structures that shifted in subtle patterns as if alive. Frank moved fast but careful, tracking the layout from memory. He'd been inside the palace for less than 3 days, but already the place had left its impression, a blend of ancient majesty and dangerous precision, like a blade carved from a star. His pulse was steady, his weapon ready. The moment Thindra said the name Prel, everything made a terrible kind of sense. The etiquette master hadn't just been teaching him how to hold a goblet or bow at the right angle. He'd been studying Frank, measuring him, watching him, and now he was making his move. A hidden panel opened beside him as he passed, and Ambassador Theron emerged, breathless, holding a datapad alive with alerts. "He's inside the throne's neural interface," Theron said without preamble. "We thought only the royal bloodline could access it." Frank frowned. "Can he control the defense systems?" Theron nodded grimly. "Yes, and worse. The throne connects directly to the planetary nexus grid. If he overrides it, he could crash the entire capital's infrastructure. Air, gravity, life support." Frank was already moving. They cut through a restricted corridor only Thindra's inner circle was allowed to enter. It reeked of polished stillness and old secrets. Statues lined the walls, depicting past monarchs, each carved in stone that caught light like frozen tears. He stopped briefly at the last one, Thindra, younger, eyes alight with fire. That fire was real. He'd seen it. And now it was under threat. They reached the final junction, a narrow bridge suspended above a yawning chasm of glowing energy, a Faso. Power source so ancient and volatile, even the Australians barely understood it. Beyond the bridge, the throne's neural chamber, a noise, echoed down the passage behind them. Boots. Multiple. Fast. Frank turned to Thyron. Go. Warn the Queen. I'll handle this. You'll be outnumbered. Frank checked the charge on his plasma sidearm. I like those odds. Thyron hesitated, then placed a hand on his shoulder. If you fall, know this, she already chose you, even if she hasn't said it yet. Frank didn't have time to answer before the bridge's doors slid open, bathing him in a cold white glow. He crossed without hesitation. Inside, the chamber was vast and eerily silent. Pillars of data light rose into the ceiling, casting long spectral shadows. In the center, connected by thousands of glowing tendrils, stood Master Prell. He was no longer dressed in the somber robes of a teacher, but in ceremonial armor laced with the sigils of the Purists, an ancient separatist faction that had once tried to erase all hybrid bloodlines. So the pet soldier comes, Prell said without turning. His voice echoed unnaturally, enhanced by the neural uplink. Frank aimed his weapon at Prell's back. Step away from the console. You don't understand what you've done, Prell said, slowly turning, eyes glowing with raw power. Her blood was meant to remain pure. You were never meant to touch her, let alone carry her child. Frank's stomach dropped, but he didn't blink. So that's what this is about. You're afraid. Afraid? Prell laughed. I am the guardian of legacy. I uphold the foundation of our people. You humans cursed with your unpredictability, your violent instincts, you don't evolve, you infect. Frank's finger tightened on the trigger. Last warning. You think this is about love? Prell hissed, gesturing to the tendrils around him. It's about power, about preserving what should be. You made a wish to steal what was sacred. And now, the console lit up with a dark pulse. I will undo that wish. Suddenly, the chamber walls flickered. The palace above them groaned. The light dimming. All across the neural map, warning signals flashed red. You just shut down the gravitational stabilizers, Frank growled. You'll crash the entire capital. Better a shattered city than a corrupted crown. Frank fired. The first shot severed one of the neural conduits. Prell screamed as feedback slammed into his body. He staggered, clutching his headbutt. Didn't fall. Instead, with a surge of will, he activated a failsafe command. The throne's interface glowed, signaling the beginning of a complete system collapse. Too late. Prell shouted. Frank charged. The two collided in the center of the chamber, Frank's combat training against Prell's desperation and half-synthetic strength. They crashed into the base of the throne, plasma sparks flying as neural wires snapped and hissed. Frank punched hard, once, twice, then drove his elbow into Prell's throat. The older man crumpled, gasping, but in the last moment, he activated one final command. A countdown began on the console. 1 minute until core destabilization. Frank looked at the swirling interface. No time to call Findra. No time to escape. He did the only thing he could. He reached forward and placed his hand on the core. Instantly, the system responded. Pain flared through his body like molten light, but something else happened too. The interface recognized him. Not as an intruder, but as connected. His neural pattern matched something it hadn't seen in centuries. A queen's chosen. A bridge. His memories flooded the system. His wish, his defiance. His love for a woman he barely knew, and yet knew completely. Countdown halted. Energy surged outward, not destructive, but illuminating. The throne chamber filled with golden light. The system. REBOOTED. Then everything went dark. A moment later, emergency lights flickered on. The neural chamber stabilized. The throne systems recognized a new protocol, shared authority. Frank collapsed, unconscious. Back in the Queen's chambers, Findra clutched a compad, her expression stricken. "Where is he?" she demanded. "Report." Thyron entered, pale but smiling. "He stopped it." "Stopped what?" "Everything." She didn't wait for more. She ran. Moments later, Thindra knelt beside Frank's unconscious body, his skin faintly glowing where the throne had branded him, a mark not of ownership, but of acceptance. A mark given only to the monarch's true equal. She pressed her forehead to his and whispered through trembling lips, "You idiot, you beautiful, impossible human." And then, for the first time in her reign, she wept. Frank awoke to silence, not the sterile kind found in medical bays, but something older, something alive. He was lying on a floating platform suspended above a basin of shifting crystal light, his body bare from the waist up, covered only in thin, translucent biomesh that glowed faintly with each heartbeat. He tried to sit up, groaning from the echo of pain threading his muscles. "You survived." The voice drifted across the chamber like warm smoke. He turned and saw her, Queen. Thindra stood at the edge of the platform, no crown, no guards, just her. Her crimson hair was undone, cascading over her shoulders like spilled fire. She wore a simple gown of soft white threads laced with strands of crystal filament, woven only for royal mourning rites, but her face held no sorrow now, only awe. "I thought I'd be dead," Frank muttered, trying to make sense of his surroundings. "You nearly were," she replied, stepping closer. "You interface directly with a throne system that hasn't accepted non-royal neural input in 10,000 years. And it didn't kill you," she whispered. "It evolved." He blinked. "That's new." "You rerouted." "A planetary collapse protocol," she continued, almost reverently. "You didn't override it, you spoke to it. Like the ancient legends." He struggled to sit up. "Any chance those legends mention migraines that feel like a planet screaming inside your skull?" Thindra knelt beside him, her hand hovering just above his chest. "The throne marked you," she said, her voice softer now. "It recognized something ancient in your neural signature. Something bonded to me." Frank looked at her, really looked. "I don't understand half of what's happening." "I don't either," she admitted, and for once, the Queen of 1,000 Stars looked just like a woman trying not to fall apart. "Then maybe we figure it out together," Frank said. She reached out and touched his cheek, the faintest brush of her fingers igniting a warmth he hadn't known he missed. "You're not just a complication anymore, Frank Mir. You're something else entirely. And I'm no longer sure I'm strong enough to resist it." "You don't have to," he said. "I never asked you to choose between me and your throne." "No," she said with a faint smile. "You just made it impossible not to." Before the moment could deepen, an alert chimed. A red holographic ring shimmered in the air above them, and Commander Dietsch's voice cut through. "Your Majesty, we have a problem." Thindra stood immediately, the moment shattered. "Report." "Assassination squads have infiltrated the inner sanctum, not just palace agents. They're wearing Proximor armor." Frank's blood ran cold. "I thought the Proxim signed the peace accord." "They did," Thindra said grimly. "So either they've betrayed it, or someone's using their tech to frame them." Frank finished. She turned to him, eyes steeled. "Can you fight?" He rose, armor forming from the biomesh, reshaping around him in segmented plates that responded to his vitals. "Can you keep up?" she smirked. "Try me." They moved as one through hidden corridors, bypassing guards and slipping through crystalline tunnels few even knew existed. As they neared the sanctum, they could already hear the sounds of battle-shouted orders, plasma fire, collapsing stone. But what stopped Frank cold was the sound of a familiar voice, Admiral Jenkins. Frank grabbed Thindra's arm. "He's not supposed to be here. You know him?" "He trained me." They entered the sanctum's outer corridor, weapons raised, only to find Jenkins in a standoff with Commander TH and a cadre of elite guards. Between them lay the body of another assassin, This one wearing not just Proxim armor, but a human. Military implant as well. Jenkins, Frank barked. Talk fast. The Admiral's eyes lit with something between relief and warning. They're hybrids, cloned operatives, pieced together from multiple species tech hours, the Proxims. Even hers, he nodded toward Thindra. Who built them? She asked, voice low. That's the thing, Jenkins said. They call themselves the Pure Flame, Purists Reborn. Not just Australian, not just human. A coalition of species hell-bent on preventing hybridization. They see what you two represent. As a threat to biological sanctity, Thindra's face darkened. We're not a threat. You are, Jenkins said simply. But not for the reasons they think. Frank took a step forward. Why are you here? Jenkins hesitated. Because we knew this might happen. Earth intelligence intercepted a signal weeks ago coded genetic data that originated from your palace. They've been watching the throne systems for years. Ever since the first rumors emerged about the ancient bonding tradition being more than myth. Frank turned to Thindra. Someone sold them your throne's genetic key. It gets worse, Jenkins added. They weren't trying to kill you this time. They were trying to impregnate the throne with a false neural pattern. Rewrite its lineage, erase your authority completely. You mean they're trying to override her bloodline? Frank said, the horror rising. Yes, Jenkins said. But the system already rejected it, because it already accepted something stronger. You? Thindra stared at Frank, stunned. You're not just my consort. You're the throne's new counterpart. Frank couldn't breathe for a moment. So what happens now? He asked quietly. Jenkins stepped forward. Now, we go public. We tell the galaxy what's happened. The throne has chosen you both. The prophecy is real. The bloodlines were always meant to merge, not remain separate. We put it all on the line. Thindra didn't hesitate. Then let's burn the lie down. They activated the emergency broadcast system from the sanctum. Across the stars, the truth began to spread. Footage of the throne accepting Frank, the assassin's hybrid tech, the death of the real Proxim ambassador, the hidden history of their civilizations. The galaxy lit up. Frank and Thindra stood together in the sanctum center, hands clasped, framed by the glowing tendrils of the living throne. Her voice rang out to trillions. My name is Thindra, Queen of Australis. I stand beside the human who saved my life, who challenged my legacy, and who gave me a future. Frank added, they told us to fear difference, but love ... Love doesn't care about purity. It cares about truth. The throne pulsed with light gold, silver, crimson, then projected a final image across the galaxy. Two species joined not by war, not by treaties, but by choice. It was the image that would define a new era. The night after the broadcast should have brought silence. Instead, the celestial palace thrummed with unrest. Screens across every continent displayed Frank Mir's face beside Queen Thindra's one human soldier, one alien monarch standing as co-equal rulers in the eyes of an ancient throne. The symbol of unity that should have calmed the storm was instead fanning its flames, because in the shadows of the galaxy, monsters were waking. In the throne chamber, the royal nexus pulsed. In soft rhythm, its crystal interface still bearing the dual imprint of Thindra and Frank's neural signatures. The technology, long thought dormant, had started to evolve. Screens flickered with language fragments not spoken in 10,000 years. And buried beneath them all, something stirred. Frank stood alone in the chamber, gazing up at the swirling holographic web dancing above him, patterns of light that responded to his every movement. He reached out, and the web recoiled before folding inward, showing him a star chart. In its center glowed a point marked only as Origin Protocol, Ark Zero. Before he could speak, the chamber's doors slid open. Thindra entered, dressed not in her royal armor but a dark travel cloak that shimmered like starlight. Her hair was braided back, exposing the crystalline crest etched into her skin from birth, a marker of royal lineage. She looked radiant and exhausted. "They're scared," she said softly. "The noble houses, the border colonies, even our allies." Frank nodded. "Because of what we are." "No," she corrected, stepping beside him. "Because of what?" "We're becoming." They stood in silence, watching the star chart pulse. He pointed to the central point. "This showed up a few minutes ago. I think it's a beacon." "Ark Zero," Findra whispered. "That's impossible." "What is?" "It," she hesitated. "A myth, a fragment from the first age of expansion, the place where our ancestors came from. Some believed it was a lost vault, others that it was a prison." Frank frowned. Why would the throne suddenly unlock a map to it now? She looked at him, her silver eyes troubled. "Because the system only activates ancestral memory when it recognizes." "Continuity?" "You mean," Frank said slowly, "a bloodline." She nodded. "You, me, the child. Together, we've awakened a chain of memory that hasn't been touched in over 10 millennia. Frank let out a long breath. "Then we have to go there." Before she could answer, the room flickered. The air turned heavy. A shadow passed over the central web. Lights died and returned altered. Distorted dot from the walls, a face emerged, but it wasn't a person. It was a simulation, a ghost of someone long dead. An image etched in crystalline code, a woman with brown skin, ancient battle armor, and eyes like molten silver. Findra gasped. "It's her." Frank stared. "Who?" "Queen Sarah Luminara, the founder of Australis. The woman from Earth who unified the warring tribes before our civilization even had cities. The one I was named after." Frank took a step forward, heart pounding. She was real. "She was more than real," Findra said. "She was human." The projection spoke not words, but thought. The entire chamber resonated with her voice, bypassing language. It spoke directly to their minds. "The blood has returned. The key has awakened. The Ark waits for the child who walks in two skies." Frank felt the meaning reverberate in his bones. "She's talking about our daughter." Findra looked stricken. "Frank, the Ark isn't just a place. It's a genetic vault. A cradle. Built by early human explorers before even your own recorded history. The Australians were not aliens, not entirely. We're descendants of Earth's first diaspora." Frank's mind reeled. "You mean this entire time, your species has been a forgotten branch of humanity," she finished, her voice shaking. "Modified by time, evolution, planetary adaptation. But genetically, we were always linked." Frank staggered back. "That means the war, the fear, the blood purity. It was all built on a lie." The projection shimmered, collapsing into raw data. The throne chamber fell silent. Then alarms blared. Jenkins burst into the chamber, flanked by guards. "We have a breach. Subsurface level. Someone's accessing the vault." Frank didn't hesitate. "The purists?" Jenkins nodded grimly. "Or someone worse. They know about the Ark. They want to get there before you." Findra turned to Frank. "We have to move." He grabbed her hand. "Where's our daughter?" "In the stasis chamber under full guard," she said. "But if someone breaches," a voice cut through the comm. "Containment failure. Multiple systems offline. Energy flux approaching overload." Jenkins cursed. "They're not trying to steal her. They're trying to kill her." Frank was already running. They reached the lower vault in minutes too late. The door was partially sealed, sparks flying from the locking mechanisms. Inside, lights flashed red over the tiny cradle-like containment pod holding their child. Around her, Crystal panels glowed frantically. A figure stood before it hooded, cloaked in shadow, one arm pulsing with synthetic energy. The moment they entered, he turned and removed the hood. Frank's breath caught. It was Prell. "No," Findra whispered. "You died." "I was reborn," he said, voice laced with synthetic distortion. "In the cradle of purity, your child is an abomination. She cannot be allowed to reach the Ark." Frank raised his weapon. "Step away from my daughter." Prell extended his mechanical arm. "I warned you what your wish would cost." He launched an energy bolt straight at the pod. But Sarah Luminara Mir opened her mismatched eyes. The energy arced toward her and stopped, suspended mid-air. Every light in the room turned white. Prell screamed, disintegrating into particles as the throne systems activated without being touched. Frank fell to his knees, stunned. Thindra raced forward, scooping up the child now glowing with soft golden light. "She's awake," she whispered. "She's connected." Jenkins stepped beside Frank. "She's not just a hybrid." "No," Frank said, watching his daughter blink with strange, calm wisdom. "She's the heir to both our worlds." And somewhere, far away in deep space, Ark Zero came online. It waited for her. The vastness of space swallowed their ship whole. The Starseeker, a sleek hybrid vessel forged with both Earth and Australian tech, hummed with barely restrained power as it soared toward a destination that hadn't existed on any star map for 10,000 years. Ark Zero. Behind them, Australis reeled. The exposure of Prell's resurrection and death, the child's awakening, and the confirmed existence of the Ark had triggered seismic political shifts. Nobles abandoned ancient ideologies. Border colonies began to align under the banner of unification. But it also triggered the last convulsions of resistance. The purists were not gone, they were moving, and they were racing Frank, Thindra, Jenkins, and the miracle child Sarah Luminara Mir to the Ark. Frank sat in the command deck, gazing out into the empty void. His eyes, bloodshot from sleepless nights, stayed locked on the swirling starless scar in space ahead. That was no nebula. That was the gateway to something older than history itself. "Report," he said. Jenkins adjusted the holographic console. "Still on course. ETA. 4 hours. No signs of pursuit yet." Findra entered, cloaked in black ceremonial armor trimmed with silver thread. She had shed her royal gown the day they left Australis, leaving behind the queen to become something else, a warrior mother, a guardian of ancient destiny. "She's sleeping," Findra said, sitting beside Frank, "but the systems are responding to her." He glanced back toward the containment chamber. The room surrounding Sarah had begun to change on its own, walls warping, lights adjusting. Even the ship's pathfinding AI had rerouted mid-flight to correct its approach using coordinates the crew hadn't input. "She's guiding us," Frank said softly, without even trying. Thindra looked at him, her gaze heavy with meaning. "What happens when we arrive?" He didn't answer, because the truth was, no one knew. The ancient archives Jenkins had decrypted hinted that Ark Zero wasn't just a vault. It was a convergence point, a junction where ancestral memory, dormant technologies, and cosmic potential fused. A place not built for one species, but for many. And that's when the proximity alarm screamed. "Multiple signatures," Jenkins sighed, rising fast. "Incoming vessels cloaked until now. They must have been hiding in the Ark's gravity distortion." Frank stood. "Purists? Or worse," Thindra said coldly, "extinctionists." Frank frowned. "The what now?" Jenkins answered grimly. "An elite offshoot of the purists. They don't want purity. They want annihilation. They believe species should die rather than evolve." Outside, a fleet emerged, 12 sleek black vessels, each one bristling with plasma turrets and stealth tech. Their design was a Frankenstein fusion of Proxim warcruisers and old Earth experimental fighters. And they were moving fast. We're outgunned, Jenkins growled. We have to turn back. No, Findra snapped. If we turn back, everything we've built collapses. We don't need to fight them. We just need to reach the Ark, Frank said. Sarah's chamber pulsed suddenly with golden light. The ship responded before anyone could touch a thing. Engines roared. Shields shimmered. And then the Starseeker disappeared. Not jumped. Not cloaked. Vanished. Frank gripped the console. What the hell just happened? Jenkins stared at the instruments, stunned. We folded space. We didn't just jump through it. We rewrote it. Findra whispered. She moved us. Outside the view screen, the void was gone. In its place, a breathtaking expanse unfolded. Ark Zero amperes. World forged from pure crystal and ancient alloys, shaped like a spiraling ring around a dead star. Giant engines spun at the outer edges, creating artificial gravity. Towering spires pierced clouds of light. And at the center was a glowing cradle the size of a city suspended in orbit. It's alive, Frank whispered. This entire place. It's alive. She brought us here, Findra murmured. Like the throne called her home. Suddenly, Cums crackled. Human vessel, came a distorted voice. This territory is claimed. Turn back or be destroyed. The extinctionist. Fleet had followed them through the rip somehow, riding the slipstream Sarah created. We can't run, Jenkins said. We're too close to the surface. Shields are still cycling. They're locking on, Findra said. Weapons hot. Then Sarah's voice echoed not in their ears, but in their minds. Protect me. And I will protect you. Every console lit up. Every system fused. The walls of the Starseeker began to shift, no longer just metal, but crystalline, responding to Sarah's power. The ship's hull expanded. Shields doubled. Weapons emerged that had not been there moments ago, etched with glyphs. No one could translate. Sarah had merged with the ship. Frank whispered. She is the ship now. Findra stood, eyes wide with awe. She's becoming something new. The extinctionist fleet fired, but before the blast could reach them, a pulse of white-gold light burst from the Starseeker's core, freezing all enemy fire mid-space. The vessels began to shake. Then came Sarah's voice again, gentle and final. No more death. The extinctionist ships began to unravel, not explode, but disintegrate into harmless strands of molecular dust, deweaponized by a force they couldn't resist. Silence returned. Ark Zero opened. A gate of light welcomed them forward. Frank sank into his seat, barely able to breathe. She didn't destroy them. She unmade their weapons. She chose a different path, Findra whispered. Not vengeance, evolution. The Starseeker entered the Ark. As they descended toward the glowing cradle, the ship's systems melted away, replaced by pathways of light. Holographic memories danced around them, visions of humans in armor, Australians in primitive form, and children with silver and brown eyes like Sarah's. Jenkins whispered, this was never about dominance. It was about becoming more. They reached the core. The moment Sarah was carried into the chamber, the Ark responded, crystals blossoming into pillars, platforms rising to meet her. The child laughed softly, and the world shook with joy. And then a new figure appeared, not a projection. Not a hologram, but a living being, a fae, tall woman with skin like obsidian glass and hair like stardust, her eyes pure light. She smiled. You've returned, she said. Findra clutched Frank's arm. Who is she? The woman stepped forward and knelt before Sarah. I am the Ark's keeper, and you are the catalyst. Frank's voice trembled. What does that mean? The keeper looked at him, then Findra. It means your daughter is the one we've waited for, the one who can unify what was broken. the one who will awaken the next age. Frank held Thindra's hand tightly. Their child stood at the center of a structure built before memory, smiling as the Ark began to light up across all levels. One light for every species, one signal for every world. And somewhere, deep in the heart of the void, those who had watched from beyond the stars stirred. Because Sarah Luminara Mir had called them. The future had arrived. The Ark awakened. From the moment Sarah Luminara Mir touched the central crystalline pedestal, Ark Zero began to pulse with purpose. Not light, not data, but life. Ancient systems whirred to motion for the first time in eons. Planetary uplinks reignited. Deep space relays triangulated. A web of communication, buried under cosmic dust and time, roared back into being, stretching from the forgotten edge worlds of the Proxen to the flooded archives beneath Earth's old lunar colony. And through it all, Sarah stood calm, her tiny hands resting on the Ark's heart like she had always belonged there. Frank watched from the platform, one hand gripping Thindra's, the other trembling at his side. "She's not just accessing the system," he whispered. "She's guiding it." Thindra's silver eyes brimmed with tears. "She's rewriting the operating structure. She's not using their language. She's teaching the Ark hers." Jenkins approached behind them, pale with reverence. "The Keeper said she was the catalyst. But I think that word wasn't meant for her alone." Frank turned. "What do you mean?" "I mean you both, Thindra. You and Frank. You chose the impossible. You defied every barrier, politics, biology, history. You asked for each other, and the universe responded." Frank didn't reply. He only stared forward at the girl whose mismatched eyes, one brown, one silver now, mirrored the divided halves of an ancient galaxy. Then the Ark spoke, not through a voice, but through vision. The walls vanished. Suddenly, they were everywhere, Frank. Thindra, Jenkins, and the child suspended in the Ark's core, yet standing on invisible ground amid a cosmic tapestry. Endless planets revolved around them. Each represented a species, a language, a history. Each had built walls around themselves, walls. A fear of purity, of control. And each wall cracked as Sarah's power touched them. From her, threads of light reached out like vines, touching worlds, hearts, minds, on Earth. A council chamber erupted in gasps as the stars and their ceiling display realigned on their own, showing new paths between worlds. On Astralis, a skeptical noble dropped her glass when her crystal tablet displayed images from the Ark, showing Sarah's face and the message beneath. The future is already born. On a distant Proxim colony where purity doctrine still ruled, their children gathered around as the soil itself shimmered, revealing ancient writings they'd never seen before. Remember Sarah. Sarah was connecting them, not forcing, not conquering, simply inviting. Jenkins stepped forward. "This is a relay. She's using the Ark to share empathy." Thindra whispered, "A child born of two worlds, teaching thousands how to feel beyond themselves." Then came a deeper voice, resonant, eternal. "You are the bridge." A second figure appeared. Beside the Keeper, a translucent silhouette, her features unmistakably human, but older, stronger, wise beyond time. Frank staggered. "That's Sarah Jenkins, the first queen." The first Sarah smiled, ethereal and warm. "You have completed what I began. You remembered what we forgot, that survival is not conquest. It is connection." She looked at Thindra, then Frank. "Your line carries both flame and root. You protect and grow. You tear down and rebuild." Then she knelt before Sarah and placed her hand over the child's chest. "And you, little one, will teach the stars to dream again." With that, the figures faded. The illusion ended. The Ark went silent. And in the stillness, a single note played. Not from a machine, not from a speaker, but from everywhere at once, a harmonic frequency, made not of sound but of understanding. The galaxy paused. And then it answered. One by one. Ships across systems turned toward Ark Zero. Some alone, some carrying ambassadors, some just listening, and all of them knew the age of division was over. In the days that followed, things changed fast. The purists fractured, their leaders exposed, their philosophy undone by their own betrayal. Survivors surrendered without bloodshed, shamed by the purity of the child they had tried to erase. The Proxim Council repealed centuries of isolation, beginning open knowledge exchanges with both Earth and Astralis. Hybrid births once considered. Taboo began to rise slowly, then suddenly, as genetics and tradition gave way to acceptance, a new alliance formed. Not ruled, not militarized, but unified, a cooperative of species connected through empathy, culture, and voluntary synapse-linked technology, modeled after Sarah's interaction with the Ark. Frank and Thindra stood at the helm, but they did not take THRONES. Instead, they built a new kind of seat, a circular platform with no hierarchy, only connection points. The Ark system served as a central hub, and Sarah became its living anchor. She never ruled. She guided. At the one-year anniversary of the Ark's awakening, the galaxy gathered. Representatives from over 50 species came together at Astralis' rebuilt palace. Crystalline trees bloomed across the courtyard. Earth skyships hovered beside Australian pulse frigates, not as warriors but as witnesses. Frank stood with Thindra, his ceremonial jacket open at the collar as always, still uncomfortable. With the title they tried to give him, the Consort Catalyst, she leaned into him, crimson hair brushing his shoulder. "You still think you were being reckless?" He smiled. "I made a wish. And I couldn't refuse," she whispered, her voice soft with wonder. "Because it wasn't just love, Frank. It was destiny." Sarah approached them, now walking. On her own, though, everywhere she stepped, the floor lit with soft golden light. The crowd fell silent. She looked up at her parents. "Can I show them something?" Frank and Thindra both nodded. Sarah stepped into the center of the gathering. She held out her small hands. And in that moment, she sang. It wasn't a melody. It wasn't a word. It was a frequency, and it unlocked every language at once. Everyone felt the same message. You are not separate. You were never meant to be. We are the same dream, just waking at different times. The spires of the palace lit. The clouds parted. Above them, constellations realigned. Even the dead star within Ark Zero flickered faintly, like the first breath of something reborn. And Frank, mere former soldier, former nobody, held Thindra's hand as the galaxy cheered for their daughter. Not a queen, not a weapon, but the future. One. That all began with a human wish, made in a moment of madness. And love. Somewhere in the universe, there are battles and borders, fears and flaws. But today they chose to believe in the impossible, and as Frank looked up at the stars, holding his family close, he whispered to no one, "I'd make that wish again."